Hey, welcome back to the Big Rand Show. As always, thank you for joining me. If you could, hit the subscribe button down below. Let's get right to it. Now, Donald Trump is doing something here. He's almost got it passed, and I didn't really think it ever happened. Back during his campaign, he talked about wanting to do criminal justice reform. I thought he was just blowing smoke, like always. But this is something I hope that when he won the election against, much to my disappointment, I hope this is one of the things that he would do. And finally, he's actually going to do something that he said he was going to do. And so here we go. The First Step Act. The First Step Act is not a huge thing. It's not going to affect a lot of people. But for those people it affects, it'll be a monumental change in their lives. It'll affect roughly 180,000 people, roughly 3% of the little over 2 million people that we have incarcerated in federal prisons across this country. Now, first off, it's going to retroactively apply for the Fair Sentencing Act to people that were convicted prior to 2010. This changed the difference between the sentencing between crack cocaine and powder cocaine, how there was a racist disparity there, and that's going to change that, right? That's going to make the changes to how that works. It's going to make it more fair to people that were convicted prior to 2010 and allow more people to benefit from these new prison reforms. Apparently, the CBO says it would only apply to roughly 2,600 people, but roughly 89% of those people are African American. So that would help in that regard quite a bit. Another key thing that this bill is going to do, though, is it's going to give federal judges more discretion over mandatory minimums. It allowed them to reduce sentences for nonviolent offenders. Nonviolent offenders should not be in prison for 10 plus years, for a nonviolent offense. Simple possession should not get you 10 years. And so that's one thing that it's going to be. It's going to help nonviolent offenders because, sadly, when nonviolent offenders go into these prisons, sometimes they come out as violent offenders. And they're not you don't reform them. You don't help them recover. You just make more criminals. And somebody having a problem with drugs does not necessarily make them a criminal, at least not a violent criminal. They may be violating the law because they bought drugs, but they are not necessarily terrible human beings. It says more than 2,000 people annually will receive a sentence reduction of about 22%, according to the CBO. I think that is an amazing thing. I think that is great for nonviolent offenders. Nonviolent offenders, like I said, should not be staying in prison for that long. Now, another thing that the article here from splinternews.com tells you is that the First Step Act takes steps to improve conditions within the prisons for incarcerated people, such as providing job and education opportunities, limiting the distance between where incarcerated people are serving their time and their families, and giving them more credit for good behavior. Now, a lot of this, apparently, according to some, is already existing law, but it gets ignored. And this law is supposed to bring that out into the open and show that they are going to let everyone know you're supposed to be doing these things. It's kind of like some of the stuff Obama did over the mental health and stuff like that. It's restating a lot of guidelines that aren't being followed. But I think it's going to be great, if they're going to improve conditions, because I know prisoners they deal with a lot, and I'm not saying that prisoners should have it, all cushy and everything, because if you've committed a crime, major crimes, then yeah, you're not going to get treated as well as say you were on the outside. But I think their conditions could be better. I've talked to people that have been in jail, been in prison. I've watched a few channels here on YouTube that talks about what has happened to them in prison, how they're treated, and their living conditions, and how terrible they can be. And I think this is a great first step, as the act calls itself the First Step Act. I think this is a great idea. I think it's going to help a lot of people. And I have to commend the Trump administration, as much to my chagrin, and the Senate for passing it. Only 12 people voted no yesterday, and most of those, I believe, were Republicans. But it is poised to pass a Republican House apparently sometime before Christmas. I think this is, as Van Jones called it, a Christmas miracle. Anyhow, this has been the Big Ranch Show. I've been your host, Jacob Cack, and I'll see you down the road.